The Honourable Member for New Westminster, Coquitlam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to talk about the lockout of workers by Canada Post and the back-to-work legislation that this government is proposing and is being debated in the House of Commons today. Mr. Speaker, I share the desire for a speedy resolution to the situation and an immediate return to regular mail service, delivery service in this country. That's why my New Democrat colleagues and I are calling on Canada Post to unlock the doors and let postal carriers return to work. Mr. Speaker, Canada Post is a profitable corporation, earning $281 million for Canadians last year. At the same time, it's been able to offer some of the lowest postage rates in the world at 59 cents to mail a standard letter, compared to, for instance, Germany, where it's 77 cents Canadian, or Australia is 88 cents Canadian, or even the Netherlands at 64 cents Canadian. Postal carriers across this country are responsible for the success of Canada Post Corporation and have worked so hard to turn it into a viable, reliable, and indeed profitable service that all Canadians depend on. The current back-to-work legislation, Bill C-6, is a one-sided and unfair approach to resolving this crisis. Instead of demanding that Canada Post return to the bargaining table, the Conservative government has taken the side of the corporation and has presented draconian legislation that makes a mockery of the collective bargaining, of fair collective bargaining. Mr. Speaker, I oppose this legislation because A, it offers wage rates lower than what Canada Post has offered, B, it tramples on collective bargaining rights, and finally, it supports attacks on postal workers' defined pension benefit plan and encourages a two-tiered wage and benefit system. Locking out workers and then imposing a contract is not fair and free collective bargaining. The resolution to this conflict is clear. Postal carriers are ready to go back to work today. Simply unlock the doors and let them continue to deliver the mail. But, Madam Speaker, this legislation isn't just an attack on postal workers. It's an attack on wages and benefits and pensions of all Canadian workers. And I will continue to work night and day, whatever it takes, to get fair resolution. Madam Speaker, the middle class is being squeezed in Canada. Statistics Canada shows that those who earned $41,300 in 1980 still earn basically the same 30 years later. A study by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives called Rising Profit Shares, Falling Wage Shares claims that the real wage gains for the vast majority of Canadians were virtually non-existent through much of the last 30 years. Even more disturbing, real wages for lower-income people or those making minimum wage are less than what it was 30 years ago. Meanwhile, the gap between the wealthiest Canadians and the poorest Canadians continues to climb. Madam Speaker, young workers today cannot expect the same standard of living or wages as their parents or grandparents. And this is what CUPW and Canada's New Democrats are fighting against. We need to ensure that new postal workers are able to earn a decent living and enjoy pension benefits. Madam Speaker, we should be working to lift wages, not impose lower wages than what was on the bargaining table by the employer. Not only has this Conservative government come up with a lower wage or offering lower wages, they want to maintain the 10 demands that Canada Post for major rollbacks, including the elimination of sick leave and deep cuts in benefits and pensions for new hires. Madam Speaker, I'd like to talk about delivering the mail to Canada's most vulnerable. During the recent rotating strikes, checks, in fact, were delivered to the most vulnerable. But if we look back just recently at what happened last week, Canada Post not only locked out its workers, but it stopped all mail delivery. which means that Canada's vulnerable were not receiving their needed checks. Now, this wouldn't happen under the existing rotating strikes. Just mentioning, going back to pensions, workers are fighting for their hard-earned benefits, like defined pension plans, and this is what's at stake. We're talking about how people live in their later years. Will they live with dignity, or will they struggle? My dad, for instance, worked 27 years for Macmillan Bloedel, and he's finding it now that his pension is being eroded and cut back. And is this the same fate that we have in store for those working in one of our most profitable, viable corporations, Canada Post? The workers of Canada Post have built the organization into what it is today. They are the real, true assets of the organization. They are the people that have made the organization viable, dependable, and profitable. Madam Speaker, let me take a moment just to talk about another good friend of mine who has really focused on pensions, an issue that is similar to many of these postal workers that we've been talking about on this side. My good friend Joel Pepper, who lives in New Westminster with his partner Jan. He's a senior and he's a veteran. And he's been watching this debate since the beginning because he too has an interest in the outcome. Madam Speaker, this veteran's check, his check, which he relies on each month, is sitting in a mail truck somewhere in this country. And he's told my office that he will wait as long as it takes so that he finds, or because he feels it's so important that the workers get what they deserve, that they get a fair deal. So here's a guy that's defended his country, who now lives paycheck to paycheck, and he wants to support us and the workers in their plight for fairness. I know Joel is not alone. I know there's thousands of Canadians like Joel who also support these workers and their bid for a fair deal. And Madam Speaker, I know that Joel is watching now, and he wants me to continue fighting the good fight. Madam Speaker, I find that amazing, that he needs his check, but even he is not willing to put his needs ahead of these workers. That's because he understands the difference between right and wrong. He understands when it's critical to take a stand. Now, I want to mention another email that I received from a constituent of mine named George. He's been watching this debate with great interest. He's a member of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, and he, along with his fellow workers, would like to be working right now processing and delivering the mail. Since Canada Post has locked the workers out and thus stopped the mail service in Canada, he says it's creating great hardship on businesses, on families, and he goes on to say that does this seem just for the Government of Canada, his employer, to punish the workers with Bill C-6. Indeed, since the full mail stoppage was caused by the management of Canada Post, who directly answered to the Government of Canada, should the Government of Canada not be directing Canada Post to remove its lockout order? He's heard the arguments from the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, the member from Peterborough, that the union membership has not had a chance to vote on any of Canada Post's offers. And George says the fact that 94.5% gave the union leadership the power to bargain a new collective agreement, which he notes is a much higher percent than the support the voters of Canada gave the Conservative Party of Canada in the last federal election. He goes on to say he's heard over and over from members of the Conservative Party of the mandate that the Canadians have bestowed upon them in their majority government. And he says it would be nice to see them respect the membership of CUPW that's been bestowed upon them, the similar mandate that his union has to come up with a collective agreement. And he asked the member from Peterborough specifically to have Canadians go to the poll. Would he have the members or Canadians go to the poll on every piece of legislation that is represented in Parliament? I think not. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Some comments. The honourable member for Glen